Everybody's all abuzz about the new Donkey Kong design, and that has led people to ask about the other Kongs. What is Diddy Kong going to look like? And that's what I'm going to answer in this video. Although I'm kind of lying, the actual main part of this video is me going over Donkey Kong's design history. It's not comprehensive and it wasn't supposed to take that long, but I ended up talking for over 40 minutes. So hopefully I can cut that down a lot. But I think it's important because it'll give some insight on what to expect and basically my mindset about why these Kongs look the way they do, and later I'm going to reference details that I'll be pointing out during this history. But if you don't care about the history part, you can skip ahead. I won't blame you, that's not why you clicked on this video. Thanks for watching. The Mario Kart World Direct comes out tomorrow, so my predictions in this video could immediately become outdated if the Kongs I talk about are in that game. Alright, let's get started. I'm hesitant to call the new Donkey Kong design a redesign. I think it's more like a design update. So here we have the original Donkey Kong arcade cabinet design, and I believe this Donkey Kong is basically the design that would influence all future Donkey Kong designs. You've got the protruding nostrils, you've got the oval-shaped eyes, the rings around the eyes, the eyebrows, the M-shaped forehead, the philtrum or the lip line, the low mouth, the slicked back hair, and even the spiky sideburn type thing. Also, fingernails. There were a couple other designs used for this game, like there's this alternate artwork which has this angry looking eyebrow here, and it's pretty similar, but it doesn't have the rings around the eyes, and like the ear is kind of weird, but I think this design overall is more influential. There's also the design used in Donkey Kong Jr., which kind of looks nothing like this, but Donkey Kong Jr. here, we'll be coming back to him later. Then we have Donkey Kong 3 and the Donkey Kong hockey designs, which honestly, these designs feel like a refinement of this design. You do have the angry-looking eyebrows from the alternate artwork, but you've got the spiky sideburns. You've got the slick-backed hair. They're basically the same design. The main difference is that there's not the rings around the eyes. So these old artworks would influence how Donkey Kong looks going forward. When Rare started making Donkey Kong Country, they redesigned Donkey Kong to give him a new look to fit with the feeling of the game. Kev Bayless was given this sketch from Miyamoto. He was given a couple sketches, actually. And you can tell these are pretty much just a refined version of these two artworks here. You've got the protruding nostrils, you've got the M-shaped forehead, the eyebrows. I should zoom in here. There's the oval eyes that are connected. There's the rings around the eyes. There's the spiky sideburns, the slicked back hair. The main thing that's new about this design, though, is the tie. Donkey Kong now has a tie. But otherwise, this is just a more refined version of these two designs. And that design from Miyamoto would be what ends up being used in all the Mario games going forward. You've got all the same things. There's the oval eyes, the protruding nostrils, the philtrum, the lower mouth, the spiky, etc., etc., etc. It has all those things, and it also has the tie. This is the official Donkey Kong design for the Mario art style by Yoichi Kotabe. This is the design that they used in the Game & Watch Gallery games, as well as commercials for the Super Game Boy, which this design I think is my favorite refined version of this design. The rings around the eyes are really big, which is very appealing. One thing about this Donkey Kong design is he has a very round body, he's very bulky. On this screen I'm going to do a bit of a branching tree of Donkey Kong's different designs, like how it's evolved over the years. Here's the original arcade design, and the other designs around the same time, which would go on to influence... I don't know why this Donkey Kong is all the way over there on his own. There we go. So all these designs together would go on to influence the classic Donkey Kong, which is our first branch here. This is basically where this branch ends. So those sketches that Miyamoto sent over to Rare, Kev Bayless came up with his own Donkey Kong design, which had these Battletoad-like eyes, the annoyed brow, and it's quite different. There's the hair slicked forward. Everybody knows this design. There's the blockier shape of the body, and he just looks really cool. This is the Rareware Donkey Kong. And this design would go on to be used basically in all of Rare's Donkey Kong games. It had very few updates over the years. Donkey Kong Country 2 gave him the iconic DK on his tie. But other than that, there's this design pretty much stayed the same. Here's an example of it used in Nintendo games. In the Nintendo 64 era, Nintendo used this design, and it's basically the same thing, just with different rendering. And here's the final version of the Rareware design used in Donkey Kong 64. As you can see, it's basically the same thing. It's really polished, though. He's got really nice fur. He's just a cool guy. So next up on the branch, we have Rareware's Donkey Kong, which stemmed off from the same sketches as Miyamoto, but it went a completely different direction. So here we have a little bit of an intermission. Rare announced Donkey Kong Racing, which never ended up coming out because Rare was bought by Microsoft. But we have this whole new Donkey Kong design here, which he's taller and more human. Look at him, he's so human. His eyes are further apart. You can tell he's got teeth. Which, I am not a fan of this design. I really don't like this design, and I'm glad this isn't what we ended up with. These designs all feel pretty uncanny to me, and I know they were early in development, but this is not the future I would have liked Donkey Kong to go in. So the next stop on the list is the Donkey Kong Racing design, which is sort of it's a shattered branch because it never ended up happening. It was lost to time. So after Rare left Nintendo made their own redesign of Donkey Kong, and it's pretty faithful to the Rare version, but they gave him teeth. This Donkey Kong has teeth, which it's not always there. His teeth are retractable. But this is the Donkey Kong that would go on to be used in basically every game for the next 10 years. The next 15 years, actually. The 2D art, we didn't really get that much 2D art of Donkey Kong before, but we started getting more 2D art in the official Mario art styles. This is art for Mario vs. Donkey Kong, and it's pretty faithful, but you can tell he has protruding nostrils, which is not normal for Donkey Kong. See, he still has the flat nostrils on his face, just like the Rare design did. Here's art for King of Swing, which also has the protruding nostrils. It's a little more stylized. We also have the official Knockaway designs, which also, these are still pretty faithful to Rare, but they have the protruding nostrils as well. So next up on the design branch is the Nintendo design, both 3D and 2D, which as you can see, it's pretty similar, but it's not exactly the same. Around this time, we got Baby Donkey Kong, which is interesting because this is clearly the Rare Donkey Kong. He's got the curvy lips, he's got the hair pointing forward, his body is less round, but interestingly, his brow is an M shape, just like classic Donkey Kong's M-shaped forehead. So I just felt like bringing that up before we move on to the modern design. This is art from Mario Kart 8, which, as you can see, he has a protruding nose now in 3D. Now, he didn't have this in-game, he still had the flat nostrils, and we were stuck with this Donkey Kong model for over 10 years. I'm so glad we're finally getting a good Donkey Kong model. This is genuinely one of my least favorite Donkey Kong models of all time. Here's some art that we saw earlier. It now has protruding nostrils. The first time Donkey Kong had the protruding nostrils in a game was in 2015 with Mario Party 10. That's when he got the protruding nostrils. And it took a while to get into all the other games. We also had Mario Tennis Ultra Smash in the same year, and he didn't have protruding nostrils there. This is from Mario Party Star Rush, I think. He did have it in this Mario Party Star Rush art. And eventually, all of the renders started having protruding nostril Donkey Kong. Now, if you remember the Donkey Kong art from before, there was a bit of a change at this point. It first started in 2014 with Mario Kart 8, just like how we got the protruding nostrils here. In Mario Kart 8, we got this Donkey Kong stamp, which, if you look at his brow here, it connects to his face, which the rare Donkey Kong always to this point has had a brow that is disconnected from the rest of his face in this art and everything, but here it is connected, and his eyes are also ovals, more similar to classic Donkey Kong, and we wouldn't see another artwork like this for a while. We eventually started getting more artwork in the line stickers for Super Mario in 2017, and I believe the Mario Kart line stickers, which came in 2017 with Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. You can see Donkey Kong has started to become more classic in his 2D artwork. You can still see the brow is connected. He's got oval eyes, and his mouth is lower. His mouth isn't curvy in this art. His hair is also fluffier. Instead of being just a straight ice cream shape, it's got some roughness to it, and his hair's getting a bit more rough. So as a reminder, here's what Donkey Kong art looked like before with the curvy mouth and stuff. And so Donkey Kong starts changing. He starts getting new artwork with the connected brow and the oval eyes. And here he even has the philtrum, the lip line. And we're thinking, things are getting pretty different. This was a change that was happening with basically all of the Mario characters. They were all getting designs in 2D that were a bit more classic. Yoshi's is the most notable. All of Yoshi's old artwork started to get updated with the new design, and they basically phased out the old design. You won't find the old design in artwork pretty much anywhere. But Donkey Kong was different because he got new artwork, but his art continued to coexist with these old artworks. A good example is this sticker from Mario Party Star Rush and Mario Party Superstars. His other two stickers use this design, but he has this shock design that has the oval eyes, the connected brow, and the furrier hair. My favorite design, my favorite artwork from this era are these Smash Brothers Ultimate artworks. I think they're pretty cool. Coming back to our design branch, here we have the modern Donkey Kong design. We have his 3D design with the protruding nostrils, and another thing to note is his irises got brighter, and we also have the new artwork with the oval eyes and the connected brow, and rounder body, and occasionally the fluffy hair. Now this is where things get really interesting. We have what I'm calling the postmodern era. We got concept art, official Nintendo concept art for the Mario movie, and Donkey Kong looks a little different here too. There are a couple things to look out for. So Donkey Kong has the philtrum, the lip line, in basically every single piece of artwork now. He's got the fluffy hair, the rounder body in every piece of artwork. And in some of the artworks, he even has the spiky sideburn thing going on, just like classic design. But he's still very clearly the rare Donkey Kong design. He's got the curved lips sometimes, the hair points forward, yada yada. He does have fingernails now though. I think he might have had fingernails in a couple pieces of the previous design as well, but I'm not sure. But the biggest change here is Donkey Kong's brow is doing different emotions, different expressions. This is brand new, uncharted territory. This is a much more expressive Donkey Kong, and we see this reflected in the movie, but the movie Donkey Kong doesn't really look that much like Rare's Donkey Kong to me. They took some cues from here, but it's not spot on. So after the movie, we got the post-movie artwork. I believe this is the first artwork to use the new design with the more expressive brow. You can tell he has the philtrum in this artwork, and a brow shape that is not exactly normal. And Super Nintendo World, we had this artwork for a couple years actually. This was data mined from the Super Nintendo World app, but we didn't get this full colored version until November, I believe. And here he also has the philtrum again, he has the messier hair, all that stuff. In the same month, we also got this new Donkey Kong artwork, which follows the same lines. So this was either November or December, but in September we got this artwork, which basically it changes everything. Donkey Kong's brow is less rigid, it's more freeform. He's got the spiky hair things and the philtrum, and this is the reason this is big is because it's a recreation of this artwork. Just like I said happened with Yoshi, where all his art got updated, Donkey Kong started having his art updated too. Which means, whoa, okay, Donkey Kong's getting a new design. We also got this artwork, it wasn't as high quality as this, where you can see the same thing. His brow is more expressive, just like the movie art, and he's got the spiky sideburn thing going on. And a really funny thing, this artwork from Super Nintendo World, in January, we got this art of it updated with the spiky sideburn thing and the... It's just really funny how this art is already outdated. So September was the start of that art, but in January, we got a merch explosion. We got tons of new art everywhere. We got so many pieces of artwork got updated. And you can clearly tell the differences in Donkey Kong's design here. He's got this little bump connecting his brow to the rest of his head, which is similar to classic Donkey Kong's design. The brow connects to the head, you got the spiky sideburn thing. In this one, he has the M-shaped brow, which we'll come back to in a second. This is art that we've had on merch for a while, but it's also at Super Nintendo World, so this art also immediately became outdated, which is really funny. There's so much art and merch at Super Nintendo World that it is outdated now. But the most important thing to note is Donkey Kong's brow. We actually didn't get this art till, I think, a week ago. But here his brow is more expressive, which is basically the main thing to note. But this is clearly still the Rareware design. He's got the round eyes, they're not connected in the middle. He's got the angry eyebrow. The hair swoops forward instead of back. He's more classic, but it's still the same Donkey Kong we all know. So one of the first artworks we got during this explosion was this piece of artwork, which freaked a lot of people out because they didn't see the other art we had been getting where Donkey Kong has his usual annoyed brow. They see this and they think, Donkey Kong's design is becoming classic, and he's never going back to the way he was before. But I wasn't afraid, guys. I wasn't afraid because I saw the new art. This just indicated, hey, Donkey Kong's brow can be more expressive now. We also got this art updated. But hey, guys, remember Baby Donkey Kong? How he also had the M brow? A couple years ago, I was looking at Baby Donkey Kong's design, and I was like, this is kind of like classic Donkey Kong's M-shaped forehead. Wouldn't it be cool if our main Donkey Kong here could raise his eyebrows into that shape when he's happy? That would be so cool. And it ended up happening. And I was ecstatic when I saw this. I was so flippin' crazy. It was so cool. I was so happy. But everyone else was like, Donkey Kong's changing. They're changing. He's not going to be angry anymore. But I knew the truth. I knew all along. I was prepared. I had been waiting years for this. So Donkey Kong got a new design in 2D artwork. And the question was, when is this design going to be reflected in 3D? Yoshi's 2D design got updated into 3D with Super Mario Bros. Wonder, so it's just a matter of time before Donkey Kong gets his, either in a new game or in a Mario spin-off. And I think it was just a couple days after this design that the Nintendo Switch 2 was announced, and we saw Mario Kart World with the new Donkey Kong design. We wouldn't get to see it in its full glory for a while, but when we did, we got this. This is the new Donkey Kong. The main difference is that his brow is thinner and it's not as angry. His eyes are more oval-shaped. They're also touching in the center, which is interesting because a lot of the 2D art still has it clearly separated. He has a philtrum, the lip line, and his body's rounder. His ears are also further up on his head, but otherwise, not much is different. The coolest thing about this design is he is just much more expressive. He can move his mouth in fun ways. His brow can move up into cool shapes. And if you want to know my opinion on him, just look at my current lock screen. And that should tell you all you need to know. So let's go back here. And we now have the final stop on our design branch. We started here in the classic days, which ended up giving us a classic Donkey Kong design, but it also led to the rare design, which has pretty key differences. He has rounder, flatter eyes that are further apart from each other. He has the angry eyebrows. His body is more human-shaped. His hair slicks forward. His mouth is curvier. And over the years, that got refined and became more classic-looking in 2D. And that 2D design eventually made its way into 3D, where, well, now his eyes are ovals. And he has a lip line. His hair is fuzzier. But he's still very clearly the same rare Donkey Kong. Something that I think is really interesting to note is his brow. Remember the brow stuff, guys, where the brow starts connecting in the 2D artwork up here? The rare design of Donkey Kong has never had the brow connect fully to the face. There's always a disconnect. But classic Donkey Kong always had the brow, well, not this design, but the official Mario design, it always connects into the rest of the face. But the new Donkey Kong design in Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bonanza, it does not connect. It's just like the previous rare design, which this will be important in a minute, but let's go back and start picking apart the Bonanza design. Here's a pretty neutral pose. Here he in my opinion, this is probably the closest he looks to the old design. The main difference just being his brow isn't as posed downward and his eyes are ovals. His nostrils sit at the top of his face up against his eyes. He has the curved mouth and his brow is kind of thin at the bottom, just like the old design. And there's a clear separation between his face and his face and the rest of his head. Here's some less neutral poses where you can see his brow is not in the typical shape anymore. Here's one where it's more angry. This pose also feels pretty similar to rare Donkey Kong for me. This one is a little weird. This is probably my least favorite screenshot from all of Donkey Kong Bonanza, but otherwise I loved it. I loved the design. And then we got this happy design where his brows can go up into this M shape, just like classic Donkey Kong. So the mouth, or I'll be calling it the muzzle, because I don't know what to call this. I'll call it the muzzle. The muzzle, the lines come out from the nose. So when he smiles, it gets kind of perked up. But it always starts at the nose. The nose sits on top of the muzzle. That's where it is. This will be important. You can see it coming out of the nose. Let's talk about Cranky Kong. So here is Cranky Kong's original design from the Donkey Kong Country games. And a little known fact, Cranky Kong is supposed to be the original Donkey Kong. And there's not really that much similar between these two designs. The main thing that he has in common are his eyebrows. He has eyebrows in this design. He's basically just Donkey Kong's design, but older. He does have eyes that are taller and closer together, like the classic design, but yeah, that's about it. As I said earlier, when Microsoft bought Rare, they did design updates on all of the Kongs. Donkey Kong's wasn't too drastic, and neither were really anyone else's, at least for the first few years. Here's Cranky Kong in the Donkey Konga games. As you can see, he's basically the same as his Rare design, nothing too special about that. And in King of Swing, he was given protruding nostrils. This was just an in-between design because Cranky Kong would go on to get this modern design. If you compare it to the Rare design, there's quite a lot different. Here his eyes are taller and more oval. His pupils are also ovals compared to the round ovals in the Rare design. He has protruding nostrils. He no longer has eyebrows, which is the one thing that's basically been removed. His brow is thicker and it connects into his face. His mouth is lower and it's not as curved. This Cranky Kong design is intentionally meant to feel evocative of classic Donkey Kong, because classic Donkey Kong is Cranky Kong. See, here's the reminder. Look, here's the oval eyes, here's the protruding nostrils. This is an adaptation of this design. Here's a look at his eyes better. You can see how they're connected in the center and they're ovals. And here's a really interesting thing. His nostrils sit in front of his muzzle. This is why I was making a big deal about Donkey Kong's muzzle being connected to his brow and stuff, and his nose. Donkey Kong's nose sits at the top of his muzzle, it touches his eyes, but Cranky Kong sit forward on his muzzle. His muzzle starts at his eyes and it goes around. It's pretty interesting. I'll get back into that in a second. So let's compare Cranky Kong to Donkey Kong. In the classic design, as you see here, there's not really that much different, but jump ahead and it's pretty drastic, honestly. The eyes are different, the muzzle is different, as I just said. The muzzle connects to the brow with Cranky Kong, and it just feels more connected. So when people are wondering why Cranky Kong didn't get a redesign in Bonanza, it's because he already had his redesign in the early 2000s. Nintendo redesigned Cranky Kong to look like this, and he looks more like a Mario character, he feels more like a Nintendo character, he looks more like classic Donkey Kong than Donkey Kong himself had for quite a long time, and that's why he didn't get updated. This is Nintendo's Cranky Kong design. Donkey Kong finally got a Nintendo Mario-centric redesign, but Cranky Kong got his 2 decades ago. I do think it's possible that this is a work-in-progress model. The fur is very flat compared to Donkey Kong, and he does have fingernails now. It's a little hard to see, but he does have fingernails. But his expressions are pretty limited. They're better than they've ever been, but they're still pretty limited, so I feel like he might get a bit of an update. Another interesting thing here is he does not have teeth. Donkey Kong in Bonanza always has teeth. I forgot to point that out, but he always has teeth when his mouth is open, but Cranky Kong here does not, which implies that Donkey Kong's teeth may still be retractable. Let's jump over to this history of Cranky Kong tree that I made. He had a pretty big jump between Rare and the Nintendo design. You can pretty clearly see it here. And he did get a new 2D design recently. And if you look closely, he does have teeth here, which means Cranky Kong still does have teeth. They're just retractable. He does not have the philtrum. And the other main difference between the model and the art is that his brow is pretty thin here. So here I traced the Mario Kart World Donkey Kong and the Cranky Kong Tropical Freeze design, and there's still quite a lot different between these. I show these to show that this is still very clearly the Rare Donkey Kong design compared to Cranky, who has the Nintendo design. Here's some of the 2D Cranky Kong art that I was mentioning, and as you can see, his brow is quite thin in all of this artwork, which leads me to believe that the final Bonanza Cranky model might have a thinner brow. It's probably the final model already that just might have better textures and fur, but you never know. And if he does get changed, it might look something like this. Here is a thinner brow with an expression closer to the types of expressions that Donkey Kong has been having in Bonanza. I do think he might be a bit taller too. So maybe something like this. I didn't put too much effort into it. I probably didn't need to do this at all, but I felt like sharing that because this is the classic Donkey Kong, but as an old guy, and this is the Rare design, but with more classic elements. One final thing worth mentioning is Donkey Kong's design is basically, it's like 2 balls. There's like 2 balls here. The head goes in and then the muzzle goes out. Meanwhile, with Cranky Kong, it is less of 2 balls, and it's more like a smooth transition between his head and his muzzle. It's more flat. It's less... Everything feels more connected, which feels more in line with the classic Donkey Kong design. Meanwhile, Donkey Kong's roundness... While the roundness is more classic, the way everything is structured is still very much Rare's Donkey Kong. And you may be wondering why I keep bringing this up. Well, it's because, well, we're gonna get there in a minute. Okay, next up is Diddy Kong. Here's how Diddy Kong has been looking for years and years. When Nintendo was giving design updates to all the Kongs in the early 2000s, Diddy Kong simply got extra fingers. The monkey designs in the Rare games had 4 fingers, and some of them even only had 3 toes. Diddy Kong also in the Nintendo 64 era had bigger eyes with colorful irises, but the Nintendo design removed that, and they also gave him teeth, just like Donkey Kong did in that era. And this is the design we've basically had for the last 2 decades. And here's the 2-dimensional art we've had as well, with the only main difference between the 3D and 2D being that he has this little bump on his nose. Where his nose is, there's this little bump. Another thing worth mentioning is in the retro Donkey Kong Country games, you can actually see a little bit of depth in Diddy Kong's eyes, and you can even see the separation between the 2 eyeballs. In most games, his eyes appear fairly flat, and I think this depth may be carried over to his new design. When Donkey Kong was getting all of his updates recently in the last few months, people failed to notice that Diddy Kong also had a bit of an update, and that we first saw this in the movie concept art. Notice how his eyes have this protrusion of the brow coming off of it. His eyes are no longer just sitting on his head, they are supported by a subtle little brow that also helps make him a little bit more expressive. People have been thinking that Diddy Kong probably won't be redesigned. I think this is incorrect, and here in Donkey Kong Bonanza we have these monkeys that look very similar to Diddy Kong, the Salvager monkeys and the Prospector monkeys. People think Diddy's new design will basically look just like these guys, and so I drew up a little bit of a concept here. This is what Diddy Kong would look like if he looked just like these guys. I do not believe this is going to be the case at all. This is not what Diddy Kong is going to look like. None of his artwork has this fleshy brow here. That's not going to be there. His ear is so high. This is not what Diddy Kong is going to look like. We do have the Salvager monkeys. They don't wear hats, so we can see their heads a little bit better. And alongside the flesh brow, they also have a second brow up here. And I think this might actually be what we see on Diddy Kong. Instead of being so high up on his head, it will be just supporting his eyes. He'll have these little brows coming out of his fur that support his eyes. I think we will get that. So the actual Diddy Kong design I think we will get will not be too different, but I believe it'll have a little bump for his nose. His cheeks will be a little bit more pronounced. He might have that depth in his eyes like the Returns games. I think his ears will sit a little bit higher in his head. Not as high as the Salvager monkeys, but a little bit higher in the head. And he will have those subtle brows. You can tell this is not really that different from what we have had before. And most people probably wouldn't even realize that his design got updated, but I think this is what Diddy Kong will look like. It's not that different, but it is different enough, and I believe, yeah, that's what he's going to look like. Next up, we have Donkey Kong Jr. This art is what inspired all future Donkey Kong Jr. designs. In Super Mario Kart, he got this adult design, which is like this design, but bulkier. He's got furrier arms, he's got these cool-looking sideburns, and he's just... This is an adult version of Donkey Kong Jr. He also appeared this way in Mario's Tennis on the Virtual Boy, and in 1994, Donkey Kong Game Boy, we got this baby design, which ended up being used a lot more than the adult design, because it was often used in tandem with the classic Donkey Kong that I brought up earlier in the Game & Watch games and such. This is the design that got used. He had these little hairs on his head, and he didn't have those sideburns, and he was a little bit cuter and a little bit softer. In Mario Tennis 64, we got this version of Donkey Kong Jr., which I believe is a 3D recreation of that baby design. I don't think they did too great of a job, but it still looks pretty nice. Then he was going to be in Mario Kart Double Dash, and he had this new redesign, which is pretty different from everything else we've ever seen before. He did not end up in the final game. Diddy Kong made it in his place, so he was scrapped. The model seemed to be used for the beta of Donkey Kong Jungle Beat. The Helper Monkeys seem to use a pretty similar model. These guys actually resemble Cranky Kong quite a bit because, well, they're clearly Nintendo designed, but they don't really look that much like the old version of Donkey Kong Jr., but they do look closer to Donkey Kong. So what would Donkey Kong Jr. look like if he were to reappear in a modern game? He would probably look like this. This is how he's going to look in Double Dash. This is his official Nintendo design. And what I did here is I gave him some of the elements of Bonanza Donkey Kong. I gave him the Philtrum, and I also gave him a bit of a thinner brow that is more shaped like the Donkey Kong one. And of course, yeah, this is a joke. I do not think he will look like this. This is a horrible, horrible design. This is not Donkey Kong Jr. And if he looks like this in the future, worst case scenario, I will be very, very displeased. So once again, here we have a tracing of the Mario Kart World design, and also Cranky Kong here, because I believe Donkey Kong Jr. should be the bridge between these two designs. As we saw on his 2D art earlier, his brow connects to his face, and his nose also sits lower down on his face, just like Cranky Kong. So I think that's what he would have in a modern game. Here is my proposal for what Donkey Kong Jr. would look like. I might have made his brow a little too small, but his eyeballs would be embedded into his brow. His muzzle would be like Cranky Kong, where it comes out of his eyes and his nose sits in front. His mouth would sit low and be shaped kind of like Cranky Kong's. And overall, it would just be closer to Cranky Kong than Donkey Kong, but you can still see a little bit of inspiration between the two. Here's some sketches of the design, because I didn't want to just leave it as this. I wanted to do something a little bit more free form. With the eyes embedded into the brow, you can have more crazy expressions like this. Donkey Kong Jr. in Mario Kart Tour was using his adult design because that's what was in the original Super Mario Kart, and I believe this is what Donkey Kong would look like when he returns. I wouldn't be upset if they brought his baby design back, because time travel exists and there's loads of babies in the game anyway, but personally I would prefer the adult design. You can see here I gave him a bit of a reddish tint to his hair and made it a little bit lighter than Donkey Kong's, and I believe Donkey Kong Jr. will be rounder than Donkey Kong. Donkey Kong is pretty round in his new design, but it still kind of tapers out near the bottom because that's what that's just part of his design. But Donkey Kong Jr. would stay pretty much round all the way around. So that was Donkey Kong Jr., but then we got the miscellaneous Kongs. There's Dixie Kong, which in her 2D art also has the nose bump like Diddy Kong does. And she actually does have a little bit of a bump in her Tropical Freeze render, but I feel like she might get one that's more pronounced. That's basically it. I think Dixie Kong will basically be unchanged aside from maybe a nose bump. And then there's characters like Chunky and Swanky Kong, which these guys never got Nintendo redesigns in the 2000s because they haven't appeared since their last games by Rare. So Chunky Kong is actually interesting because he only has 4 fingers on his hands and feet. So who knows what Chunky Kong would look like, but he'd probably have 5 fingers. Swanky Kong I feel like would probably look pretty similar to how he does now, just a little bit bulkier. I don't know what they do about his face, because this is just Donkey Kong's face with a gold tooth. So who knows what they do there. And the final one I wanted to bring up was Candy Kong, because Candy Kong actually looks pretty similar to this monkey girl from Void Co. And yes, she is a monkey, she does have a tail. It took me a while to realize that. I thought she was like a gibbon, but nope, she's a monkey. And this Candy design, it's obviously a Nintendo design, so I don't think she would get much of a redesign. But she had pretty flat fur before, so maybe she'd be really furry now. And that's what I'd want to see. I traced over and I made this little mock-up. I think her fur should like basically act as her fur would like be cuffs, sleeves on her, it's like, they look like sleeves. And I think really furry, really fuzzy Candy Kong looks fun. So that's what I'd want her to look like. That's basically all I had to say. This video was a mess, but I had to get it out there. One final thing, speaking about this Voidco monkey girl, I noticed she has black fur and she has these cuffs. It makes it look like her fur is almost like a sleeve, kind of like what I was saying I think Candy should have. I couldn't help but notice that Bluster Kong has the same kind of thing going on. Welcome back, Bluster Kong. Bye-bye.